I can hear you.
It's being recorded.
Okay.
I'm a ditz when it comes to this.
Recording is in progress.
Yes, okay, we're good.
So where's it say recording? Send it up there,
It did, it just popped on and said it.
but it should have a little red dot.
Oh,
recording.
well, let's go.
What says up there?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, great.
great.
Thanks for
Well,
your patience, everybody.
too many computers. You had 3 computers going. That's why.
All right.
So you're recording
I don't
and this
know.
is recording. You know,
Just
you're
go.
not recording.
Speak.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna review, and since we're recording there, I'm gonna finish it. So we're gonna review last year, at the end of last year or the beginning of December, we studied Daniel chapter 7. So we'll do a quick review of that. That was about Daniel's dream of the 4 beasts. And so now chapter 7, Daniel basically reintroduced the 4 earthly kingdoms that he'd introduced in chapter 2. And so if you want to make a point, what do? You either repeat it or say it again in a different way. And so instead of using the statue, he's using these 4 beasts as opposed to the statue representing the 4 kingdoms. So the first half of chapter 7 was the night visions, the 4 beasts that arose from the turbulent sea. Then there was the judgment vision, and then the Son of Man, where the Ancient of Days gave the kingdom to the Son of Man. And then the second half was the interpretation of those visions. And so the 4 beasts were the lion with wings, which is understood to be Babylon. And then the bear with the 3 ribs in his mouth, which chapter 8 this week tells us that it is Medo-Persia. There's no question. He's literally telling you what countries they are. That's the same with the 3rd beast, which is the leopard, with the 4 wings and 4 heads, who is representing Greece, also told to us today in chapter 8. And then the 4th beast is so evil and terrifying that there is no earthly beast to compare to describe how bad it was, and so, or is going to be. And so basically it's the final world empire, which most people think to be Rome or the derivative of Rome, something that's come out of Rome over the years. And then the interpretation of the 4 beasts, Daniel has a very particular interest in the 4th beast with its 10 horns, especially the 11th horn, the little horn, which waged war against the saints, and it was profoundly disturbing. And if you look at Revelation 13, it also clarifies the satanic occupation of the Roman Empire that basically controls the world politics at the time. And so this is the Antichrist. So the work of this little horn, or the Antichrist, is to subdue 3 kings, speak against the Most High, make war and persecute and prevail against the saints, change the times, overthrow the existing laws and order. But then after this, of course, after this 3.5 years of horrendous evil comes the Son of Man in judgment, who sets up his eternal kingdom. And this is where our hope is fulfilled. And this is where in chapter 2, the stone came which smote the statue and now became the mountain filling the earth. And this is the same, the parallel to that here in chapter 7. And then all 3 sections in the second half of chapter 7 end with this clarion promise that is part of the point of Daniel, and that is that the God's saints will receive and possess his eternal kingdom. If you look at verse 18, 22, and 27, they all say that same thing, that they are going to receive and possess the eternal kingdom. So the Ancient of Days judges with fire. The beast in the kingdom, or the kingdom, is overcome, slain into the fire. And then the Ancient of Days has already given the Son of Man the kingdom earlier in the first half of chapter 7. But after terminating the Gentile rule, he establishes his eternal kingdom. And that is the fulfillment of the prophecy, the end times. Focus verse was, verse 26, 27, but the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, dominion, and greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. The truth last week was earthly kingdoms temporarily wreak havoc as permitted by God, who eventually brings judgment and eternal reign with his people. Application: how is Scripture's prophecy bringing peace into the havoc God has permitted in your life? And now for a preview for today, we're looking at chapter 8. There's also 2 parts. Verses 1 to 14 is Daniel's vision of the ram and the he-goat. And then 15 to 27 is the interpretation of that vision. So now we're back into Hebrew. Remember, we went from Hebrew chapter 2 to chapter 7 into Aramaic. And now we're going back into Hebrew because the visions and the interpretations for the rest of the book now relate fully to the Jews in Jerusalem and no longer have a worldwide audience per se, for which the Aramaic was used in chapters 2 and 7. So the vision of the ram with the 2 horns is more powerful than other beasts. It magnified itself. And then the he-goat from the west, which wasn't touching the ground, but flew across the land, attacked the ram, hurled it to the ground, and trampled it. And the he-goat magnified himself greatly. We get this, this crescendo of self-magnification. There's a bit of a theme here. So in the fullness of his strength, this he-goat, the horn was broken and his life was cut short, which we know this first king of the he-goat was Alexander the Great, and he died at 33. So the 4 horns then replaced the large horn, and then the small horn came out of one, and this time he magnified himself to be equal to God or Onias the high priest, whether you're talking about a near fulfillment of this prophecy or the far fulfillment of the end times. So he suspended sacrifice, and this would be
Yes, Antiochus Epiphanes.
And so he suspended sacrifice. He removed the vessels from the temple. He desecrated, destroyed, and laid to waste the temple. Now the interpretation comes in the second half. So Gabriel now is going to give understanding and interpretation to Daniel specifically about the end times. So Gabriel says this is specifically about the end times. So he seems to be talking more about literally the end times and not the near fulfillment, which Antiochus Epiphanes was also fulfilling. So you can kind of read it either way. And I think it's sometimes good when the word is a little bit ambiguous like that. It keeps us off of getting into a situation where, yes, I know this is the way it is. And you know, those kind of things aren't very, can get problematic. So anyway, it could be either, or it could be both, Antiochus Epiphanes or the final Antichrist. It's obvious. So the he-goat was Greece. The large horn was the first king. The 4 horns were 4 less powerful kingdoms, which were his 4 generals that after Alexander the Great died, his 4 generals took it over and the kingdom was broken up. And then this small horn, another king, rose up, and he was fueled by Satan himself. He is an Antichrist or the Antichrist, depending on how you interpret this. So prophecies often have 2 fulfillments, a near one and a far one. So the description very much fits Antiochus Epiphanes to a T. And it also gives advance warning for the end times to the Jews and Christians by having this early interpretation as well, early fulfillment of the prophecy. Characteristics of this Antichrist. Remember in verse 12, he flings truth to the ground. That is so vivid to me, flinging truth to the ground. You see that happening all the time today. It's just truth is trampled. Truth doesn't matter. It's not about truth. It's about what you want to see and what you want to happen. So he's insolent and he speaks ambiguously in nebulous terms. So his speech is not overtly evil, but there's evil behind it. And we see a lot of that today as well. He's powered by Satan. He's corrupt and destroys the mighty and the holy. He's shrewd, causes deceit to succeed, and he magnifies self and convincing himself that he's great. He's deluded and he's brought to destruction. He also stands against the Prince of Princes. So he doesn't overtake with sword, but he deceives with words in peace. So he's destroying people while they're at ease and secure. But this will be broken, and he does die, not by God, but not by man, but by God's hand, shortly after the rededication of the temple in 164 BC. That's Antiochus Epiphanes happening again. So Gabriel says it's about the end times, but it also fits Antiochus. So we can look at it as both. So the focus verse is verse 25 of chapter 8. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken without human agency. The truth, I thought there was a bit of a theme here. Each of the three sections of the last half talks about deceit. Sorry, I forget what I was going to say. Do you remember what I was going to say?
About deceit.
I didn't. Yeah, at the end. Okay, so the first two sections, the ram and the he-goat, it both talks about how they praise themselves, right? They magnified themselves. The next one magnified himself greatly, the he-goat, and then the Antichrist or Antiochus Epiphanes even magnified himself to equal to God. So this crescendo of self-magnification. Each time it says that. So I thought it said it 4 times. In fact, with the Antichrist, it was said twice. So, and those came in, I thought I had the verses written down here, but I don't. Oh yeah, 4, verse 4, verse 8, verse 11, and verse 25. So I thought that was significant enough to make that part of my truth and application today. So the truth I put in was self-magnification breeds evil and eventually destruction. And then the application to fit with that is, how often do you see yourself in the light of your accomplishments as opposed to the light of the holiness of Christ? Something to think about. And the 2 themes, the applicable Daniel themes, are 1, God is sovereign over all, and 3, godless earthly kingdoms fall, but God's kingdom reigns forever. Sorry, I was so disjointed.
No, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, it did eventually die. So just as Karen was saying, we had the chapters that are, so all of the bold italicized are in Aramaic. So Hebrew was the first chapter, but now we're in chapter 8 and we're in Hebrew again. And now I want to also give us perspective. So, you know, when we talk about this, we can know with confidence that we're in 554 BC. How do we know that? And we're going to discover it in the text. It tells us that we're in the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. So he reigned for 17 years and he died in 539 BC, which you remember when the writing came on the wall, Tekel, right? Mene Partham. It was that night he died because the Medes and the Persians took over, and that was in that year 539. But 17 years earlier, he had the vision of the 4 beasts, which Karen just talked about. And in the 3rd year of his reign, we're going to discover he's having the one today, the ram and the he-goat. So that should give you a picture. So all of this is still in the future. There is no Medes and Persians to speak of. There's not a kingdom of theirs, right? He gets in the vision, he gets thrown over there, but that doesn't exist yet. This is all future, even to him today, and it's 17 years in the future. Well, -3, it's 14 years in the future that he is being predictive. So it's very interesting. So, and the vision of the 4 beasts was in the first year. Now, I'm really happy that, this, by the way, is a little picture of his life. So up until about 14, he's in Jerusalem, but then he gets taken captive by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar, right? And then he lives out the rest of his life in Babylon, which ultimately then, in this year, becomes under the control of Darius and Cyrus, right? And this is in Belshazzar. So there's a couple of little reigns in here that we'll look at briefly. There's an evil Marduk, and then another king who reigns only for a couple months, and then Nabonidus. And 3 years in, Nabonidus goes to Arabia and leaves Belshazzar in charge. And so that's where we are in the 3rd year of his reign. So, we're gonna do three things today, and we might not get through all of them because of time. And we're decided we're gonna split chapter 8 into two portions, and we're gonna stop whenever we're done, which will be at 8:30, if that's okay with you. So we're gonna review the second half of chapter 8 for clarity. The reason I want to do that is because guess what? For the very first time, we're actually getting Gabriel tells Daniel what it's about, and he tells him specifically what it is. And so we can say with confidence, and that way I know I'll have your attention because you know I'm speaking the absolute truth because it's explained to us in the second half. So last week, when we looked at chapter 7, there is some other ideas about what that really means. You listen to Gary Hamrick, and he thinks that the eagle's wings are the US and that the bear is Russia, Gog and Magog. But that's an interesting, it's a limited perspective. And I think that the Americans tend to think of themselves relatively highly. That's why they see themselves as the eagles. But most conservative scholars, and you'll see exactly why tonight, see it more the other way, that it really is a repeat of chapter 7 in terms of the actual hierarchy. And the beauty of it is tonight, I can be very confident in everything I say because he explains it. So then we're going to have an expository study of chapter 8. And then what Karen alluded to is that you get Antiochus Epiphanes as a sort of a foreshadowing of what's to come, but then you get the repeat because we know the Antichrist is still coming. He's referencing the future. That happens very often in scripture where you get a repetitive, it's called pattern, not just prediction, and the vision concerns the distant future. He says it. All right, so beginning with chapter 8, it tells us exactly what's going on. And so let's go to 19 to 23. So we're this bronze border is telling us that it is in fact talking about what we're reading tonight, but we're picking up on verse 19. So we're halfway through the book. He said that halfway through the chapter. So Gabriel says, I'm going to tell you, so you're going to discover this is Gabriel, the angel, the archangel. He gets introduced to us. It's the first introduction to Gabriel in the Bible. I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. So the real reason we're getting this is so that we can understand end time prophecy, right? And it's very much like Revelation, which we've already studied, but we will allude to again when we get to chapters 11 and some of the later ones. So the two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. So who are those kings? Who is the king of Media?
Cyrus.
Darius.
Darius.
And Persia is Cyrus. Very good, Gary. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. So that's where Karen was clear. It's Alexander the Great. There's no doubt about it. You can't really find a competent scholar to debate that because it's so obvious. And the four horns that replace the one that was broken off represent the four kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. So we're going to discover he had four generals. And when he dies, he actually gets asked the question. So he's on his deathbed, and they ask him, well, to whom does the kingdom go? And he says, well, give it to the strong. Well, that would have created some interesting discussions. So four of the generals actually get kingdoms out of this, and you'll see where they come from and where they go. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. And I believe that is referring to the Antichrist that we saw as the little horn in chapter 7, which is a reference to him here. He's a little horn again, but he's not coming out of the 10. He's coming out of the 3, out of the 4 in this way, actually out of one of the horns of the 4. So Gabriel is speaking. This is what's happened. You got the two-horned ram. That is Media and Persia. You got the shaggy goat of Greece. That is the large horn between its eyes is the first king. And the four horns are the ones, and then ultimately we get a repetitive pattern prophecy. Okay, now we're going to take a look at an expository study of chapter 8. So we got the bronze outline that tells us we're in chapter 8, beginning at verse 1. So I told you that we're in the 3rd year of Belshazzar. How did I know? It starts that way. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision. So historically, the dreams and visions were all held by Nebuchadnezzar, but now it's Daniel himself who gets the vision. It's the second one, right? After the one that had already appeared to me. And in my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam, In a vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with two horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged toward the west and to the north and the south. No animal could stand against it, and none could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. Now, I believe that every little nuance of the Bible is for a reason, and there's a reason that it tells us west first, then north, and then south, because that really is predominantly the direction. So we're in the third year of King Belshazzar, and chapter 7 was in the first year of his reign, so we're 3 years apart, and we're seeing a very similar story unfold. So when we read chapter 7, I've given us a golden outline now because this is chapter 7. In the first year of King Belshazzar, the reign of King Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and so it was so which year Belshazzar was chapter 6? That's a trick
This is
question.
last year.
His 17th year was his last year.
Was he
And that's right. And now we're recording Daniel's dreams. And he's reporting his
17
own.
years old? Oh, no.
No,
Sorry,
17 years of
17
reign. Yeah, 17 years of reign. Okay, and then we discovered that very night of chapter 6 or 5:30, remember, it could be in either one. You'll notice the footnotes say it actually should be in chapter 6 because it makes more sense there. That very night, Belshazzar, king of Babylon, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. So Darius is the Mede, and we're going to discover at the end of chapter 6 that Cyrus is the Persian, right? So makes it very clear. Okay, good. This is the kings of Babylon. We have Nabopolassar, it's the dad of Nebuchadnezzar, but Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom doesn't really take off until he's in charge. And the reason he's Nebuchadnezzar II, because very, very early on, hundreds of years ago, there was a previous Nebuchadnezzar that shows up. So it's the second, and it's the year that Daniel's taken into captivity. We have evil Marduk, which reigns from 562 to 560. Don't forget, as the number gets smaller, we're getting later, right? Then we have Neriglissar, who reigned for 4 years. Then we have Labashi Marduk, and he reigns only for a couple months, and then he gets killed. And then we have Nabonidus. Now, Nabonidus did not want to be king. He is the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar, married to one of the daughters of him, and he reigns, but 3 years in, he says enough is enough. But you remember at the end, when Daniel is offered a position of royalty because he wasn't able to interpret the handwriting on the wall, he says, I can make you third in the kingdom. The reason Belshazzar can only make him third is because his dad is number 2, and he's number 2. His dad, Nabonidus, is actually number 1, and that makes Daniel only possible to be number 3. All right. Okay, so I saw myself in the citadel of Susa. Where the heck is that? It is 230 miles east of Babylon, 150 miles north of the Persian Gulf, halfway between Ecbatana and Persepolis. It's the capital of the Elamites in antiquity, and later it's the main residence of Persian kings, and a famous palace begun by Darius I and later enlarged by Xerxes. It's the home of Esther.
Is that in Iran?
Pardon me?
Is that in Iran?
Yes, today. And it's the city of Nehemiah, as recorded in Esther 1:2-5, right? So we can see, I'm not going to read all this because we don't have time. So we
Nehemiah
discovered,
is from Iran?
pardon me?
Nehemiah is from Iran?
He came from there at the time when it was known as Persia, right?
Cupbearer.
Yeah, cupbearer to the king. And so you remember how many people got thrown into the lion's den after Daniel survived the lion's den? How many satraps were thrown in?
150.
120, plus their families. But here we discover there's 127. So the kingdom has grown a little bit by this time, because there's 127 provinces, and it's because we're near the end of the Persian. And so 120 got thrown in the lion's den. They governed all over the land. You remember the edict had to go out all over the land, but they happened to be in Babylon at the time because they were having a party, right? So interesting. But for 180 days, we discover in verse 4, He displays the vast wealth of his kingdom. And the king gives a banquet lasting 7 days. And that's actually when he calls his wife in to Vashti, but Vashti didn't want to come. Very good for her. And so Esther gets chosen in place of her. There's Susa. So where the heck is Babylon? There's Babylon. So exactly we said 150 miles north of the Persian Gulf, notwithstanding the Persian Gulf was deeper in its day, and Alexander the Great was going to dredge it out to have ships at all the way to Babylon, because that was his capital. Oh my goodness, that would be a long way to dredge. But that was their ambitious vision. And so there you see the full extent of the Persian Empire. And so Daniel is transported over to Susa for this vision. They're here, right? All right. And so there he is. And there's a canal called the Ulai Canal. And this is how it looks today, quite a citadel. And so there we go. Nehemiah started out there. That's his trek. That's his route to Jerusalem, from Susa to Jerusalem. The story of Esther takes place here. And this is the proof of it. Esther chapter 1, verse 1. And number 2, verse 2 says, King Xerxes reigns from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gives a banquet. And that's the one where Vashti gets banned and Esther gets chosen, right? All right. So remember, the Medo-Persian Empire is the silver and gold chest and arms. Daniel's there to see that transition. He stays with it, right? And so that's very interesting. And the edict that goes out in the Medo-Persian Empire goes all the way from India to the Upper Nile. So that's a big region to have conquered with it. So this is a secular map, and you know that the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I challenge you that if you look at the Bible first, you'll always be able to make better maps than anybody else can. These guys don't even recognize that the Roman Empire consisted of 2 legs, because they got the Byzantine Empire separate. Very, very interesting how it all rolls out. And you want to inform them from the Bible. But in this map, that is the Babylonian Empire. And it kind of, these are lines of longitude, and the other is time, right? So up to 3000 BC, but we're looking here, we're at about 600 BC. So right here is where we are in time right now. This is when this whole vision is happening, right? That is Belshazzar, and it's in his 3rd year. That is the Persian Empire. This is the length of the Persian Empire. And then this is the Greek, or the Seleucid Empire that we're going to read about after Alexander the Great. This little brown spot is Alexander the Great. And there he is. If you could just model that, you'd be able to see the flesh on him. This is if you take the pillar and you were to lay it down here. This is the head of gold. This is the silver of the arms and chest. This is the bronze of his midriff. And then you got his legs, which are the Eastern and the Western Empire. The Eastern Empire of Rome outlasts the Western by 1,000 years. Oh my goodness. I want to do a chart on here, because then what I would do is I would show the growth of the empires, right? That ultimately is then the Grecian Empire. And then the Roman Empire goes all the way to Britain, right? So it would be the next step. So I'm going to work on that slowly over time. All right. So you remember that, so he says there's a ram standing beside the canal with 2 horns, but one is bigger than the other, but grows up later. Now, do you remember when we had the bear idiom? The bear goes on one side with the bones in his back. And so it's the same idiom, the same context. So he's stronger on the one side. And that's what they're trying to say with these. And so who did Gabriel say the horned ram was? It is Persia, Medes and Persians. Yeah. And how does it make sense that it charges west and south and east? So this, by the way, is a bronze ram statue from the year 400. And we're going to discover that he goes west because he's coming from here and he drives all that way. And then he goes north, but not as much, and south, just a little less. But that's how the Persian Empire under Darius and Cyrus ends up becoming. They wore helmets with ram's horns on it. In fact, the head of the army would wear a ram's head on his head. That's interesting. So very interesting that that's true. So Kyle is the theologian. The ram with clean horns and clean feet, sharp pointed horns, the guardian spirit of the Persian kingdom. So we're going to discover that Daniel's prayer gets interrupted in chapter 9. And the reason that the angel Gabriel could not come quick enough was because he was tied up with the spirit, the evil spirit of Persia, right? It gives us a glimpse into the dark side. For 21 days he can't get there.
Is that Michael? That's not Michael.
Michael comes to help him. That's what lets him be released to come to explain the next piece of the vision, which is going to be coming with Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness, chapter 9 is going to blow us away, right? And so interesting. So there was the bear of Medo-Persia from chapter 7, right? And we saw it got up taller on one side, but it came up later, right? And that's what we're seeing. This is Xerxes. He's the last great ruler of Persia. He's the king during the days of Esther. He made a foray against Europe and against Greece. And he has an army of 300,000 men, plus women and children that he travels with. Oh my goodness. A trek out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he gets defeated at Thermopylae. So the Greeks are very smart. They don't go out to meet the Persians. They let them come to them, but they're in this tall gorge. And it makes the Greeks worth 10 of one of the Persians. Oh my goodness. So they have no trouble defeating them. And it creates an incredible feud, right? And a fleet of 300 vessels was destroyed by a storm at Salamis. So when Xerxes discovers this, that it went on, he goes down to the water and of the Mediterranean Sea, and he beats the water with his belt that he takes off. It shows he's a few bricks short of a load, but there you go. All right, so let's have a vivid description of what the takeover looked like. So now we're back into chapter 8 again, verse 5. As I was thinking about this goat, this ram with the two horns, one came up ahead of the other. Suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. It came toward the two-horned ram I'd seen standing beside the canal, and it charged at it with great rage. And I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its two horns, and the ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground, trampled on it with its feet, and no one could rescue the ram from its power, which is insane because Persia is huge, very strong army, and this little goat is overwhelming. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn or the king gets broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grow up to the 4 winds of heaven. Very interesting. So who did Gabriel say the goat is again?
The goat is the second.
Greece. And who does he say the big horn is?
Antichrist.
Well, he says he's not. The Antichrist is
Oh,
going
he's
to come
the
up
horn.
in the 4th horn. He is the
The big
large
horn
horn
is
in the
the-
middle that gets broken off.
Alexander the
That
Great.
is Alexander the Great.
The first one.
Yes. Okay, so now we're going to see, he starts out in Macedonia. So Philip the Macedon is his father. The 7th wife of Philip is Olympias, and she bears the son, Alexander the Great. But they think that she might have helped kill Philip of Macedon to ensure his ascendancy to the throne. Now she starts a rumor. This is interesting. She slept with snakes. We know that for sure. That's part of the history, but she starts a rumor that Alexander the Great was conceived by intercourse with a snake. And so that makes him kind of godlike. But now he's got to push west. Here, by the way, is a bronze statue of a goat. And then he pushes, down and the same. So the other one pushed predominantly east. This one pushes predominantly west. All right. And here is his travels. And he goes all around. And in 15 years, he never loses a battle. And he conquers all of the known world. And at age 33, he dies. He made Babylon his capital, and they had a challenge going on. They had a big bowl of wine, and so he drinks through it. But then he stays really well preserved for 6 days, and doctors that are reported on it think he wasn't dead. That's why he wasn't decomposing very fast. He was in a stupor and in a coma before he died. but he was still cognizant enough to say, give it to the strong, right? So we have Cassander from Macedonia and Greece. These are the four that take over from Alexander the Great. Cassander is married to Alexander's sister. Her name is Thessaloniki. And so that is where the city of Thessalonia comes from. And so the daughter, and now she got raised, so they don't share the mom. They're both siblings through Philip Macedon, but the Olympia takes her in. Both, well, she's got the son, Alexander the Great, she's looking after him 100%. But now she also takes in this daughter Thessaloniki. So they really grew up as sisters. And then he marries Cassander. We get Lysimachus, takes over Thrace, Bithynia, most of Asia Minor. We have Ptolemy, who takes over Egypt, Cyrene, Arabia, and Petra. And in the year 270, under Ptolemy's reign, we get the Septuagint written in Greek. So we get the Hebrew Bible translated to Greek. And we have Seleucus. Seleucus is the bad one. It's Syria and the lands to the east, all the way to India. And out of him will grow the little horn. And Antiochus Epiphanes appears as that little horn. So there you get a map that shows you Cassander's zone, Lysimachus' zone, Seleucus' zone, and Ptolemy's zone. And it's in the Ptolemaic reign that we end up getting the Septuagint. After that, now in chapter 7, we had a leopard with 4 heads. And so this now is being replaced as an idiom with the goat with the 4 horns, right? And without a doubt, the leader is Alexander the Great.
4 wings too.
Yeah, and at 29 years of age, he throws himself on his bed and he cries because, oh my goodness, there's no more kingdoms left to conquer. In 6 years, he conquered the mighty Persian army. What's going on with me connecting him? Can you guys still hear me okay? Or are you frozen? Ruth says she can hear, so I'm just gonna leave this up in that corner.
To your picture there.
Is it no longer there? Oh my goodness, so the picture dropped off. Because we have some kind of a weak connection. And I have to reshare again. Did you guys see the map a moment ago?
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
Is it gone now?
yes, you go on right now,
Yeah,
and it's trying, this machine is trying to connect me here.
again.
Talk about issues, eh?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God there'll be no internet in here.
I'm gonna let this thing try to reconnect me for a minute, guys, and I'm gonna carry on. Are you okay with me just speaking for a minute? At the age of 30, his empire stretches from the Mediterranean to Hindu Kush. At the age of 32, he dies in a debauched state in Babylon, which he makes his capital. And his legacy is a new Achilles and a new world
Are you
order.
connecting to Zoom?
Yeah, that's what it's trying to do. I'm gonna maybe just go in and connect again.
Yeah, go in, unknown
Close.
errors.
Try to make it-
Go, you can get to see your slides, you can go to your email.
Just to repeat yourself.
I'm gonna get out and just close this and get in again.
Yeah, you have to- yeah, look at that.
Sorry, guys.
Okay,
Okay,
So much.
yeah, try that.
Septuagint, it's like first 5 books of the Bible is Septuagint. What's Septuagint?
are we not on the internet?
It's a translation.
Well, the Wi-Fi will do you, check the Wi-Fi.
I have to.
That's what that means.
We're charging, but that's okay.
That's
It's
the Torah,
fine
is
to
the
charge.
first 5 books.
But
of the
is
Why
it
are we not
connected?
on it? My phone? Actually, Lake House.
Your Wi-Fi is not showing up here.
Yeah. Should I try to connect to the Lake House browser?
I don't know. Neither's
The
working.
Greek translation of the Old Testament is this one.
It says action needed, no internet.
I'll try.
It says no
That's what
internet
we
there.
did.
Clicking from
No
here.
internet here or there.
Here we go. It's now coming up.
Just here's the idea. Well. And then.
Sorry, guys.
I'm used to trying to.
Yeah.
So they were started.
Yes.
Oh, he's
That's
laughing.
Daryl.
There it is.
Oh, It's like you did a whole bunch of them.
You have to get on again?
Yes,
Yes, you just put. Yeah. Last day tomorrow.
Installing updates.
We're loading. Loading truck.
Close this window.
I bet they need a few,
Oh, yeah.
oh,
I bet they need a few trucks. There's only 4 trucks.
Don't know.
Where did they take it?
am I back?
Going to these.
Now you are.
Okay,
Now try shooting.
join without computer audio, right? Otherwise we get that thing. Okay, continue. Got it. We're back. Hallelujah.
So, health reporting center.
Thursday after school.
There it is.
Okay, we're good?
We're
Everybody can see that again? All right.
Yes.
All right, and this is where we left off. He was a brilliant military strategist and court politician. So this is interesting. The one-horned goat was a symbol for the ancient Macedonians. And that's in history. And the zodiac names Persia Aries the ram, and the Greek is Capricorn. Capra means goat, and you know the word cornucopia, right? Like at Thanksgiving time, it's the horn of plenty. So corn is horn. And on May 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with 35,000 troops and defeats the Persians at the Granicus River. In 3 years, he totally ends it, right? And they're finally broken at Gargamella or Arbela near Nineveh. All right, now we're back into chapter 8, reading it again. We're on verse 9. Out of one of them came a horn which started small but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. What do you think the beautiful land is? It is Israel. Yeah, yeah. Eretz Hachivah, the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. Now we say a switch, right? We're talking about starry hosts. So you now get the very strong opinion that this is now talking about the Antichrist of the future, which we will touch on again and again in this book of Daniel, right? But he's made that shift, just like we saw in Ezekiel and Isaiah, where suddenly he's talking about Satan and the Antichrist. And oh my goodness, right? It threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them, set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. So not as per Jesus, but as per Michael. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down because of rebellion. The Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was flung to the ground, just like Karen explained, right? Isn't that incredible? All right. So Antiochus was a dynastic name for rulers of the Seleucid family. And there you see the Seleucid kingdom. And Antiochus Epiphanes is going to come and he's going to attack Jerusalem and the beautiful land and do exactly what is said. So he goes to the east and to the south and to the beautiful land. That is that small horn that pops up and tramples it to the ground. All right. There's a sudden shift into the spiritual realm. In verse 10, we're going to discover that, so in chapter 10, we're going to discover, do not be afraid, Daniel says, the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding, to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I've come in response to them. This is Gabriel. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Now, he will be in the Persian Empire. So who is this prince of the Persian kingdom? It's an evil force, right? An evil, you know, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers and authorities and principalities and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And this is one of them. But then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. And now I've come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns the time yet to come. So again, we discover chapter 10 is for the future. And verse 20, he says, do you know why I've come to you? Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go, the prince of Greece will come. But first, I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. but no one supports me against them except Michael, your prince, the prince of Israel or Judea. So very, very interesting. So the prince of Greece, you remember that map, doesn't appear again for another 200 years, right? Oh my goodness, I have to go way back for the map. So the map we saw here, it's not, so Greece doesn't appear for another 200 years. So, oh my goodness, we end up discovering that that this angel, Gabriel, is having to fight a lot of people for a long time in order to do what he needs to do. Okay, where were we again, where we left off? Just after this. So there's a sudden shift to the spiritual realm in chapter 10. Oh my goodness, I had another map like that. I didn't need to go back. All right. Now we're back onto verse 11 and 12. So who took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord and the sanctuary was thrown down? We're going to discover it's going to be the Antichrist, but it also was Antiochus Epiphanes. In order to discover what that is, we go to the Apocrypha. Now the Apocrypha are one of the secret or hidden books, but it makes its way into the Catholic Bible and into the first King James Bible. And so when they get translated, they actually have those books in it, Maccabees 1 and Maccabees 2. And this is what it says in Maccabees 1. I'll read it to you, and you can actually read much more of it. Oh my goodness, it's scary. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandments of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to this religion and sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. No burnt offerings permitted, sacrifice not permitted, drink offerings not permitted in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbath. So go ahead and work on the Sabbath and the festival days and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people and set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice pigs on the altar and unclean beasts. Oh my goodness, this is making God mad. That they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanliness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances, and whoever should not do according to the command of the king, he should die. In the self same manner he wrote to everybody in his kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Now you remember when Darius writes a letter to all of the people, he says you gotta believe in the God of Daniel. That's the true God, the one that can rescue you from the lion's den, right? When Nebuchadnezzar writes his letter to all the people, it says God is truly God, right? This is saying exactly the opposite. Oh my goodness. And so if they found a woman who had a child that was uncircumcised, they would kill the baby and hang it around her neck. And it was just what they would do. And it writes that in that chapter. You can go and read it. Now, guess what? The Maccabees, they revolt. And on December 25th, on Antiochus Epiphanes' birthday, he sets up the abomination that causes desolation. He puts a sculpture of Zeus in the Holy of Holies. That is the abomination that causes desolation. 3 years, the Maccabees fight against him. Judaeus Maccabeus fights against him, and they conquer him. And on his birthday, 3 years later, they cleanse the temple on December 25th. And they rededicate it. Now that shows up in John 10, verse 22. Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was in the winter, so we know it's not the other festivals of dedication because they're in different seasons. And Jesus was in the temple courts, walking in Solomon's colonnade, and the Jews who were with him gathered around him, saying, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you're the Messiah, tell us plainly." Now it makes total sense that they would be talking about him taking over because they're celebrating the rebellion of Judaeus Maccabeus, right? To get that, how that hinges together. Well, why aren't you leading our rebellion against the Romans? Now, I went to the modern Hebrew Bible so that I could find out if this really is Hanukkah in the Bible. So you see this word Hanukkah. So this is hey, a patach. These things fall off, like in the newspaper, you don't see that. A nun, kaf, and a hey. Hanukkah, okay? That is the magic word, because it's the festival. Then came the festival of Hanukkah, the dedication, Hanukkah. And it's backwards because everything writes right to left, right? If you're east of Jerusalem. The word ha is like the, that's the. So ha, the dedication, Hanukkah. And just so that you can be sure, I've gotten it for you here too. This is right off of a recent Israeli website. And there you know for sure. And in the footnotes of your Bible, it may say this: the Feast of Dedication, an 8-day festival of lights, held in December, 3 months after the Feast of Tabernacles, to celebrate the Maccabees' rededication of the altar, reconsecration of the temple, reconsecration of the temple in 164 after the desecration by Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, Epiphanes is his own title. It means the illustrious one, but the Jews didn't like that, so they call him Antiochus Epiphanes, which means the madman. Right. Okay. So now we're back on verse 13. I think we're getting through further on this one. I don't know, with all those houses. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, how long will it be for this vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary will be consecrated. Okay.
Hi, James.
Hi, James Suji. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. So it came near to the place where I was standing. I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand the vision concerning the time of the end. And while he was speaking to me, I was in deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me and raised me to my feet. This is Gabriel. Now, Gabriel, what else do you guys know about Gabriel?
The archangel.
He's the archangel. What else?
Archangel.
Yeah, what else do you know?
There's a trumpet. Isn't there, does he have a trumpet or something?
I'm sure he has a trumpet.
And Elizabeth
Yes, Elizabeth first.
and Joseph.
So how does he interact with Elizabeth? Because he doesn't talk to Elizabeth. What's Elizabeth's husband's name?
The priest.
Zachariah.
Yeah, Zachariah. And he's serving in the Holy of Holies, and Gabriel meets him there. And he says, you're gonna have a son.
You love them.
And he says, how can my wife have a baby? She's past menopause. And he says, because you didn't believe me, you're not gonna be able to speak. So he has to write down the name John, and the minute he writes down John on the little thing that's his name, then he's allowed to speak again. Very interesting, right? You guys remember that? So this is the encounter with John the Baptist's father in the Holy
Didn't
of
something
Holies.
happen to him, or they used to have to hold the priests out of there, the Holy Holies?
Yeah, that's right. They have a rope around his leg in case he stays in too long, but they can probably hear there's still something going on in there. The angel says to John the Baptist's dad, Zachariah, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. Hokey Dinah, and I've been sent to you to speak to you and tell you this good news. Now you will be silent, not be able to speak until this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. So Gabriel also comes to Mary, the mother of Jesus, because so Zachariah goes home and he sleeps with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth has a baby, and 6 months of her pregnancy in, God sends the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, to a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David, and the virgin's name is Mary. And the angel says, greetings, you are highly favored. And he goes on to tell her about how God will overshadow her and she will be with child. And she says, let it be so. Very interesting. All right. So now in the latter part of the reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue will arise. Now remember, he says, I'm going to tell you what will happen in the latter time of the wrath, because this is the appointed time of the end. But guess what? In the meantime, you've got these 4 horns that replace the one that's broken off. So I made this little sculptured one, and that's a really weird looking goat. But this goat exists. This is a multi-horde breed from Romania. This is one in the States that got exported to the States, and it has 4 horns, just like that. But we remember that this goat started out with one central one, which was Alexander the Great, right? But it gets broken off at its point of power. So, oh my goodness, he dies at 33 when he's really strong and at the peak of his kingdom, and the 4 other ones take over. By the way, there is Jacob sheep reintroduced to Bethlehem by Jenna and Jill Lewinsky from Abbotsford, Canada. They had, and it shows the map of how, you know, they always track with the lineage of the sheep. The sheep made their way, and they've now made their way back 100 and some, but you can see this guy, little guy here, has 6 horns. This one has 4. That's a Jacob sheep. And they went all the way back to Bethlehem, right? 119 sheep went back in the year 2019. Yeah, and now they've established a flock over there. All right. So this horn, the central one, gets broken off. All right. So it goes, and the goat becomes very great, but at the height of the power, the large horn there gets broken off, and it's replaced by 4 prominent horns that grow to the 4 winds of the heaven. Right. So we get Antiochus Epiphanes is going to come out of Seleucus, right? So we end up discovering, oh, there we go. It grows out of the 4th horn, out of Seleucus, right? You guys like my little PowerPoint? One of them came, another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land to Judea, and it grew until it reached the host of heavens. Now we see that switch, where Satan suddenly takes over through some of the starry hosts of the earth and trampled on them. Okay, what about this one? He'll become very strong, but not by his own power. He'll cause astounding devastation. By whose power does he become strong? Satan's, absolutely. He'll cause astounding devastation, will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. Who are the mighty and holy people? The Jews. He will cause deceit to prosper. That's interesting. If you take this now as a cyclical prophecy, we know that deceit is going to prosper under the reign of the Antichrist. I can see deceit starting to prosper all over the world. And he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take a stand against the Prince of Princes. Who is the Prince of Princes? Jesus Christ, Prince of Princes, right? Right? He will, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He'll be destroyed, but not by human power. How does he get destroyed? By, you remember in the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had with the head of gold, that a rock not cut by human hands comes and strikes that sculpture on its feet and destroys it, and then grows into a mountain that fills the entire earth, right? While this is a reference to Antiochus Epiphanes, we also discovered that, like in Isaiah, it is reference to the future, to the Antichrist in the end of time. He'll cause astounding devastation, will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper and consider himself secure. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. All right, the following are characteristics of both the Antichrist in 167 and the Antichrist at the end of time. And these are in verse 23 to 25. He'll achieve great power by subduing others. He'll rise to power by promising false security. He'll be intelligent and persuasive. He'll be controlled by another, by Satan. He'll be an adversary of Israel and subjugate Israel to his authority. You know, just the very fact that Israel is the point of discussion in the paper is prophetic fulfillment and should be our way to evangelize people. Like, do you not see what's going on in Israel? Why Israel? It's this tiny little country, guys. It's a blip on the radar screen. What's going on? Like, why is it a cup of trembling to the whole world, right?
God said it was gonna be.
God said it was going to be.
Spiritual battle.
Yeah, he'll rise up in opposition to the Prince of Princes, the Lord Jesus Christ. His rule will be terminated by divine judgment. So all of that we see in verse 24 to 25 of chapter 8. Your Majesty looked, this is going back now to chapter 2. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, right? Chest and arms of silver, the beads of the Persians, belly and thighs of bronze, the Greeks, the legs and iron of clay, the feet partly of iron clay, the Roman Empire, And while you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands, struck the statue on its feet of iron clay and smashed it to bits. Okay, all right. The visions of, now this is interesting, evenings and mornings are in Hebrew, boker and eretz. So I haven't got that exactly right. Vaya era, vaya he boker. So boker and era. And boker, morning and evening. So it's actually translated often into days. Maybe in your Bible, Christian, it says days, but in reality, it's mornings and evenings, because that's what it says here, is erev and boker. But seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond my understanding. So 2,300 evenings and mornings is again from verse 14. We saw it as 2,300, erev and boker. And Daniel is told to seal up the vision because it's for the future. In Revelation, we see the exact opposite is true. But this 2,300 evenings and mornings results in 3.5 years if you take the morning and the evening sacrifice, which is just about right for Antiochus to start his problems to the time that it's reconsecrated, just exactly as the Bible says. Now, the Seventh-day Adventists, when they got started back in the 1800s, took this as a year-day interpretation, and they had it pegged for the year 1843, that Christ was going to return. Obviously, it never happened, so they changed it to 1844. It still didn't happen. But you know, we kind of wrinkle our foreheads, but that happens a lot that people try to predict. But now they were Christian enough to not predict the rapture, because that day is never predictable, right? We know that for sure. But they did predict the cleaning up, which they saw the earth as being cleaned up. And it's not just like it. So there you have the word eretz and boker, erev and boker. Erev and boker. Erev, reish, beit, and boker. Beit, but a hard beit because it's got a little hole in it. Hole, kaf, reish, boker. Boker. Yeah, boker tov. Have a cup of coffee. All right. Now in Revelation, we discover that Jesus says to John in Revelation, listen, blessed is he that reads and keeps, and they that hear the words of this prophecy. We had that over and over again, right? We're blessed by it, and keep those things that are written there. And for the time is at hand, it's now. So Revelation for us now is to wake us up. Guys, it's time, it's getting close. And he said unto me, seal not up the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. So in Daniel, he tells them, shut it up. It's for a long time to come. So seal it up, actually. Seal it up, because it's way in the future, because all this still has to take place. You need Persia and Media and Greece and Rome and thousands of years to go by. But to John, he says, don't seal it up. Don't seal it up. The time is at hand. And that's the difference of the days we're living in, right? All right. Now, just really quickly, this concept of pattern versus prediction. Hermeneutics is influenced by our worldview. And we understand from Jewish rabbis, which created something called the Midrash. By the way, the whole Jewish faith has to undergo Siri. She's trying to phone somebody. But in the year 70, the temple's gone. There's no more sacrifices, right? So in the year 90, they hold 20 years later the Council of Yamnia, and they say we've got to redefine our faith. So when you talk to Jews today, and this is coming from the Temple Institute, they say, oh, just pray and do good. That's what the rabbis tell their people. But then if you say, but what about your sins? They can only be atoned for by a blood sacrifice, then they'll kick you out of their store. Right? So they have to redefine the religion. But we're going to look briefly at Rabbi Hillel. Hillel is regarded as the greatest of the Hebrew sages of the Second Temple period. He's the grandfather of Rabbi Gamaliel, the tutor of Paul, who he references to in the Bible, who defended the rights of the Jewish believers in the book of Acts. So there's 7 principles about this whole repetitive cycle. The argument is from a minor premise to a major one. It goes from minor to major. The teaching is based on an analogy of inference from one verse to another. You can gather its meaning. So you remember when the Persian wise guys come to discover the king that's born in the east, right? They reference Ephrathah as you're not the least Bethlehem of Ephrathah in Judea. It's a very interesting verse, but they recognize it as being the one, and we're given it in the New Testament as being the one that's it, right? So it references one verse to another, right? And then a principle based on 2 verses. The main proposition is derived from 2 verses, or we have teaching from a general principle to a specific one, or from a specific one to a general one, and you have, as it comes from another place, similar in another passage, and a word that is learned from its own issue, a matter that is learned from its own subject. Those are the 7 principles of the Midrash in the interpretation of the Bible, which is why we can know with
Something went wrong.
Oh,
Please try again.
Siri, hush.
That's gonna shine you now.
Yeah. So the Western mind, we tend to think of prophecy and prediction and fulfillment. The Jewish mind sees prophecy as a pattern being recapitulated, where patterns of events illuminate a thematic play in the future. The Western Gentile misunderstandings are crucial in understanding the errors of dominionism, restorationism, preterism, which continue to confuse our eschatology when we study the last things. So you remember in Ezekiel, and we read this about the king of Tyre not so long ago, so I'm not going to read it all again, but it's interesting because he talks to the king of Tyre, but then he gets to this interesting place where suddenly he's no longer talking to the king of Tyre. This is still to the king of Tyre, and we discovered that there was judgment on Tyre and it got taken over. But we're going to discover that right here at this point, it switches to address Satan. You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom. Now we know that that's not the king of Tyre, perfect in beauty. You are in Eden, the garden of God. The king of Tyre was not in Eden, but Satan was. Every precious stone adorned you. Well, that's not true of the king of Tyre. Carnelian, chrysolite, on and on. Emeralds, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold on the day you were created. They were prepared. That's not the king of Tyre. This is talking about Satan. You're anointed as the guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. Okay, so Satan was a cherub, a guardian one. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the firestones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Lucifer, through your widespread trade, you're filled with violence and you sinned, and I drove you in disgrace from the mountain of God and expelled. So this is a perfect example of that cyclical prophecy that we have to get into our heads. So when we see Antiochus Epiphanes, we know that it's going to look very, very similar. So there's a couple of things that we know have to happen. A temple has to be rebuilt. A Holy of Holies has to be there, and somebody has to set up a statue to their idol in the Holy of Holies, which we already know what we think that looks like. And also the sacrifice has to be abolished. In order for it to be abolished in the end time, it has to be reestablished. Well, they've already got the red heifer. They've got those sheep that you just saw, the Jacob sheep that are now back in Bethlehem. They're getting ready for that, right? So all nations who knew you are appalled at you and come to horrible end, and you will be no more. And it's due to pride. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And of course, he gets thrown ultimately into the lake of fire, where already for 1,000 years, the Antichrist and his false prophet were thrown in 1,000 years ago. Then at the end of the 1,000-year reign, Satan is briefly released, only to get thrown into that same lake of fire. Oh my goodness. Now in Isaiah, you get the same thing in Isaiah, right? Because there we go. So you've fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You've been cast down to the earth. So obviously that's Satan. It's not one of the kings. It's not the king of Babylon, actually. You who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will send to the heavens. Well, you know, that is Satan. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. That is Satan. I'll sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon, which is one of the Canaanite mountains. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds, I'll make myself like the Most High, but you're brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the dead.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. In chapter 7, we saw as well the Antichrist, because there was a little horn which came out of the 10, destroyed 3, but becomes a symbol of the Antichrist, actually is the Antichrist, because it's making reference actually to the end time. And there we get one of the primary characteristics as he spoke boastfully. So here we go. This puts it all together for us, right? Chapter 2, head of gold, silver, bronze, and clay. And I'm sorry, iron, and toes of clay and iron. Then we get the lion, right? The head of gold with wings, with eagle's wings. Then we get the bear in chapter 7. And then we get the ram, which is the same as the bear. And he raises on one side, it comes up ahead of the other. This guy gets a horn. The second one comes up later, but becomes the greater, because the Medes is the smaller one, the Persians is the bigger one. Then we get the belly of thighs and brass, and that is this leopard that hardly touches the ground. Well, the goat does the same thing, barely touches the ground, conquers all the world, and is one entity, but breaks into 4 heads. And we know that he's not shown here with his 4 horns, but he has 4 horns. Very intrigued by the fact that I could find a 4-horned goat that exists. Then there was the monster which comes up, which is Satan and the Antichrist. We discover in chapter 13 of Revelation that the red dragon is the devil, right? So there you go. And
So what's the difference between Satan and the Antichrist?
the Antichrist is a person on earth who's powered by Satan.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is Aries, the ram, and this is, and of course, you know, we don't believe in astrology, but it's interesting that since 2000 years before Christ, they already had defined Persia in the astrological charts as the rams, and way before those empires ever existed, right? You will seek me when you and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord. So why is this all so complicated and so deep? Because it's going to take energy and effort to discover the truth. And as we go through the next couple chapters of prophetic word, we know we have to apply ourselves, because it's not easy. We're going to be challenged by Jesus to discover the truth. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings, which we are kings, as you know, and priests, a nation of kings and priests to the glory of God. We got to search it out. All right. That's it. We're done, honey. Right on 2 minutes late.
I know why we're getting through here, because we already have an hour Sundays, we have an hour and a half here,
All right.
that's why.
Okay, well, Sunday, they're gonna get the rest of the story.
So next week we'll have to figure something else to do.
What do you do on Sunday, Al?
I have lots to do. What?
No, Sunday, where do you do the?
Sunday, we do it up in the upper room at the church. So if you ever miss one, come and see it there.
Wait, what day is that? Sunday night?
Sundays,
Yeah.
mornings, no church.
What time?
Do we
Nine.
stop recording now, Fred?
Yes.
And that's the
Before
first, like,
church.
that's the.
But wait a minute, you don't wanna shut them out, so stop recording.
Yeah.
That's more beautiful than your video.
I'm no longer, I'm not recording, you're recording.
So you do Sunday and then Thursday, or it's not Thursday and then Sunday?
Sunday and then Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, so Sunday, so if you missed Tuesday, you've missed it. You can watch it, you can watch it on YouTube. I'm just gonna stop recording here.
Look, it's the little ram's horn.
Bye.
No, they're gonna stay on for prayer.
No,
Yes.
we're just stopping recording. Did it stop?